Hello, we want to welcome you to our show today, the Sunnyside Community Voice. We're back in the studio with with a very exciting show. And actually, this is going to be part two to the show we had on last week, speaking on economic disparity. We have a new guest with us on today. We have Ms. Gladys House, who is a black contractor with us today. We have Mr. Raphael Coyle, who is with us today, and of course, Pastor Nash, our president of our show. Today, we're going to give over, because there's a lot of information that Ms. House has to give to our public, and we want to give her time to talk about some of the things that she's concerned about. And then Mr. Coyle will follow, letting us know some of the things that he's concerned about. So, Ms. Harris, Ms. House, we want to welcome you to the show today. Being here with us today, it's really important that we bring people to our show that's going to give our community things that's going to help them.
Thank you.
So we thank you for being here with us today, and we'll give over to you now that you may talk to our audience.
Okay, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
I'm very pleased to be here. My colleague, Mr. Coyle, will address the economic disparity, and I want to touch sharply on the social disparity of the Black and Latino communities as it relates to mass incarceration, racialized control population, in other words. Okay. And basically, society tends to overlook or disregard the incarcerated population, which is basically the new undercast system, so to speak, and that's really unfortunate. But that is to, I guess, basically let everyone know that, oh, I'm okay, but the problem is over there. In fact, that same mentality occurred during pre-emancipation, in that the blame was put on enslaved blacks at that time to say, well, look, you got to be better than they are, you got to work harder, and you'll be accepted. Right. And here today, everybody's saying, oh, they shouldn't have done the crime. You know, they're not looking at, well, high unemployment in the Black community. Of course, it's highest always in the Black community. And when you try to address jobs, it's often difficult, housing and so forth. Now, imagine being coded, if you will, that's the key phrase, when you have been penalized or served time in the penal system as a parolee or inmate or what have you. It's very difficult when you're released to obtain jobs, housing, or even social service like food stamps or what have you. And in cases when you have to go back to the root of the problem, from the old Jim Crow to what is known as the new Jim Crow today. And it started with the war on drugs. And it was interesting because the war on drugs started in 1982. But in 1972, nationwide in the United States, we only had 350,000 persons incarcerated. Okay?
Triple almost now.
And so, in fact, it was so low that prison experts said, well, we need to discontinue the penal system. Okay? Because it's a waste of money and the recidivism rate is so low. However, the war on drugs kicked off in 1982. And the incarceration rate went from 350,000 to more than 2 million today. Now, that's just only 2.1 million locked down. That doesn't include the 5.3 million that's on parole or probation. So really you're looking at close to 10 million, or just under 10 million persons technically incarcerated. Okay? And when you consider the nonsense about pumping up the war on drugs to get rid of the drug kingpins and so forth. Well, when you look at the stats, they basically show clearly that these are nonviolent crimes. So if you're trying to stamp out, you know, this violence and crime, you know, murder and things of that nature, assaultive crimes, well, the drug offenses alone, really, you missed the whole deal. But when you look at the stats, most of the persons serving time, or 2/3, are basically for so-called drug offenses, nonviolent offenses.
Right, I agree with you.
And it keeps going back to that. And if you were to shut down the penal system today, you would see a loss of close to 1 million jobs.
Yeah.
Judges, lawyers, you name it, anywhere in the so-called justice system. That is why it's so important to keep something going at the detriment of the Black and Latino communities. And now you have the pretext violations, in other words, traffic violation. Oh, you didn't signal when you were getting ready to turn. Just the so-called probable cause to harass you if you're Black or Latino, and to just arrest you for anything. And if you don't have anything, they're going to plant. Okay? And please don't be on parole. You're going to jail.
It's big trouble.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so it's a vicious cycle, and everyone wants to keep pointing the finger at the offender. Well, keep in mind, sure, you have some who break the law and they need to be dealt with, okay?
Right.
But we're talking about the non-violent
Low
offenses.
profile,
But therefore, the Fourth Amendment is thrown out the door when you look at the various cases, all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Right.
The Fourth Amendment, hey, well, you can't just, searches and seizures. That goes out of the door. How many people, whether they're Black or Latino, will tell an arresting officer approaching them, no, you cannot search my vehicle. You need a warrant. Okay,
you're going to jail.
You're going to jail. Okay, but the Supreme Court said, any reasonable proven person should know to tell the officer, no, don't search. Okay, that's not even real. And then when you look at the Eighth Amendment, okay, you said, the offense doesn't fit the punishment. Okay, that's abusive punishment that you're applying to. Well, okay. Well, cases the Supreme Court have held up, well, just give him life for selling drugs. Come on. In England, for example, if one is caught with a kilo of cocaine, he serves 6 months. No parole, no probation. 6 months, and that's it. Okay? The United States is the only country on this planet that incarcerates people, giving them life, giving them just unheard of sentences, all for what? To keep that economic system going. And when you break down who's benefiting financially, it's not the Black or Latino communities.
That's right.
Now, here again, it's at our detriment that other cultures are benefiting, and they have society so convinced to say, well, look, just play along with it. Just say, shame on them. They shouldn't have been selling drugs or whatever. Well, let's look at the stats on that. The real drug dealers in the United States are Caucasian, and the highest percentage of drug use by far it's by Caucasians.
You're right, exactly right.
Okay, so somebody is lying to the public, and it needs to be stopped. But going to the issue of all of the myths about how we always see crime or little drug dealers in Houston on different corners, and so people have the misperception that it's a crime-filled neighborhood and Blacks. No, it is not who you see. That's the majority, and it's unfortunate that the ripple effect, the long-range effect of those parolees, or I call them clients, okay, that this rides with them for the rest of their lives. And it's like, you already served your time, so why does it still follow you?
Restitution should be.
So the laws need to be changed.
Of course.
And the only ones who are going to force the change will be the Black and Latino communities, the persons who we elect. Okay, we can change this cruel, unjust system. Okay, and one final point is that out of this whole picture, the one with the power in the judicial system is the prosecutor. The DA.
That's it.
And the DA can throw out a case. Or he can make one. Okay? So we have to begin to start voting, but don't just tell the people to vote because so many people died for the right to vote, but vote to say, well, hey, well, if you elect this DA, then who will be sensitive to us?
Right.
Maybe he'll be like Dallas's DA, Craig Watson, and say, okay, well, let's introduce the Innocence Project.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, let's free some of the innocent people in prison and so forth. But it goes much deeper than city council persons who have the choice to increase your utility bills.
Right.
Give the people more to work with it, and when you tell them to go vote, well, why go vote? Well, so you can keep your utility bills down, or keep your relatives out of jail, or your neighbors out of jail, unlawfully being arrested and harassed. Keep the money into the black communities, because all of the confiscated items or property of those incarcerated, well, 8% of it is not reclaimed. Because you have to pay an attorney again to go to bat to represent you. So therefore, you're losing out everywhere you turn as black and Latinos. You see? So it's like you're working in a system for the system, but you're not getting it's not working for black and Latinos. So we've got to take a closer look at this, and I urge your public to go to a
Who we putting in office,
known as The New Jim Crow.
Right.
The author is Michelle Alexander, and it will really guide you on the movement. But it's going to take the answer to this whole problem is our coming together as consensus and saying, well, look, it's going to have to be a whole different mindset of the society, black, white, all colors, just as it took back to pre-civil rights movement. And, we've been freed 3 times, 1790, 1865, and 1965 in the United States. So, and here we are right back into enslavement under the new Jim Crow. Something is wrong, people.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. House. You're passionate about what you believe. You have something to say?
And Ms. House, really happy to have you on the show. I've been knowing you for a while. Listen, you hit it right on the head. Now, when our people get incarcerated, when they get out, the first thing they're told, get your job. But when you tell them that you've got a record, you've been locked down, that turns them off. If, in fact, if we would judge cases based upon the evidence, marijuana, now you said it right, if it was not for marijuana, we wouldn't have that many attorneys. You go downtown, attorneys run over you with briefcases, and they don't defend you. They just represent you. I was invited to a forum one time as a judge, James Gray. He wrote a book about the war on drugs and why we are losing it. It's sad sometimes that I see young men and young women, African Americans, go to court and have to get an attorney and bondsman. It's senseless. I've told some of the judges this, I've told the prosecutors, I've told the DA, it is senseless to take a young person, first-time offender, and give them a record because it follows them. They can say, oh, well, they're going to be expunged, it won't show up on your record. It does do that. And when a kid goes to apply for a job, it's going to come up. And you know how we're looked at. If it's 1 ounce of marijuana and they found the employer find out, we're drug dealers. We're not users, we're drug dealers, even though we don't have any ships, airplanes, and all that to bring that stuff. So if we don't stand up in our community, and you said it right, we got to get people in the office that are concerned enough that we even go to the district attorney and say, look, I told the district attorney last week, he was there, I said, there are some cases that the judges could say, we're not going to spend time with this. Give the kid a strong reprimand from the bench. They've got a House Bill 2391. A police officer have an option, make arrest, let them go, or write them a ticket. They're not taking that option of letting them go for a small amount. Now, we have one DA, 0.14 gram, that would be no arrest, nor would it be an arrest for residue in a crack pipe. But that's thrown out because the policeman union got upset with this present district attorney because they said she was soft on crime. Okay, my thing was this: if in fact that the judges and the prosecutors and giving out minimum sentences, who has the power in the court to prevent that? The judge, of course. There are some cases I feel that are not strong enough when it comes to small amounts of marijuana that would even warrant a person going through all of that. First of all, the sheriff department and HPD should work in hand as far as how much marijuana would warrant getting an arrest. A police officer in the community, he's cruising the community, find a bunch of kids smoking marijuana. Now, let me say this. It's against the law. We know marijuana is against the law.
In Texas.
But sometimes, why can't we find a police officer that's passionate enough to say, look, boy, let me tell you, you get out of this neighborhood, if I catch you doing this again, I'm going to lock you down. But don't take a kid and ruin their life. And that's what's happening now. And can I really tell you something? Our elected officials that don't really fight for us when they get in position to fight, they don't stand up for us. I've got a problem with that. And you talk about voting, putting the right people in place. Who are the right people?
Well, if I
That's
may
good.
add,
No, you come on anytime.
based on, I pulled an awful lot of black men out of the back seat of police cars to stop them from going to jail. What people don't realize in black and Latino communities is if you disagree with the reason that officer or arresting officer is trying to take you to jail, you can demand that his supervisor comes out on the scene. By law, that officer cannot pull off with the person in the car when you've made that request. Or he can lose his job. Okay?
Very few people know
then
that, though.
the supervisor comes out to, be judge or try to, analyze the situation. Now, that was in my situation over in Freedmanstown when I stopped many. And then we've been blessed with a pretty good captain, Captain Edwards.
Right.
He's been working, and prior to Captain Edwards, we had our first black captain, Captain Williams, Bruce Williams.
Yeah.
But I met with Captain Edwards on some of the police harassment in Freedmanstown and this and that. And so last week, I witnessed something about 4 o'clock in the morning, because I get up very early on the computer. And it was a black officer. He got on the address on this mic, and he told the young man, he said, look, where do you live? I know what you're doing, so you need to get home, okay? And the young man went on home. He didn't arrest him or anything like that. And we're so far from the days in Freedmanstown where Officer Boutte and Officer Sherman, they used to throw football in the street with the children in our community. That so-called war on drugs really damaged or breached the good rapport that HPD had at one time over in our community. And so hopefully with Captain Edwards, he can only do so much, but I let him know that I was pleased to see that. And back on the war on drugs initially when it began, federal judges began to resign from the bench because they just weren't going along with the war on drugs. And these were judges appointed by then President Reagan. And some judges were just in tears. They said, this is so unjust.
Right.
We won't have any part of it. And so I'm just saying that in order for us to do more, stop telling people just to go to vote. Tell them, no, we want you to hold accountable these elected officials, okay? So, and I think that's where the problem rests, is that people just are told to vote, but not why to vote, and just don't hold the politicians accountable.
Right, I agree with you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Claude, you've sat there patiently. You've been listening. Now let's talk about your area, economic disparity, which ties into everything.
Yeah, the thing that Ms. House is talking about, it is definitely, it's kind of an outgrowth of the economic disparity in the first place.
All right.
And so that's one of the reasons why I work on that issue, or I address that issue, bring it up so much, is because the economic disparity that we see in the black community, and it's shared out there in the Hispanic community also, it is the leader. It's the leading cause of why we have these types of issues. I brought in a chart this morning, if we can see one of the charts here. And the purpose of the chart is to show you the population and the dollars. So when you look at an environment like the Anglo population having 2% more than blacks, controlling 80% of the contract wealth coming out of the city of Houston, that's a family that can send their kids to college, that don't care about Obamacare because they've got the money.
Right, of course.
That money comes from all of us as taxpayers. I mean, remember, you're talking about 26% of the population getting 80% of the money.
Right.
On the flip side of it, the black population, which is just 2% less, getting less than 2% of the contracts.
And that's sad.
You're talking about a people that can do very little to entertain their kids in a positive way.
Exactly.
That's where you get exposure to different kinds of job skills, different things that we do in this American life. And so as long as you're economically undermined, you can't go out and reach and do those newer and advancing things. You can't create products.
Right.
You can barely work to keep the lights on a lot of times. So many people are on assistance. And I'm not a guy that looks for being on assistance. I'm a guy that looks to help create and innovate so that we can have businesses that are hiring people, that are actually funding events for youth. You talk about, you know, a youth center or something like that. Now you're starting to, you start to feed into a possibility where a community, a business wealth created in that community can help fund things that the community needs. And right now we're very disadvantaged in that area. The Hispanics, they have over 40% of the population, and they're getting a little over 5% of the money. These numbers come not from me. The statistical population numbers come from the City of Houston's website. The economic disparity numbers come from the City of Houston website. And so I'm bringing this out to say this, that we're not going to solve much of our crime problem. We need to work on it. It's true. But until our people are engaged in the doing positive things, and that's what you do with capital, you can help create and innovate.
Of course.
Until our people are a part of that process, we can't get there. And so when we're having bond elections, this is why I don't support those bond elections, because all we're doing is setting up a mechanism where somebody gets the money, they get the large slice of pie, we end up with the bill.
Right.
Just another bill to pay, maybe a shiny building that everybody can ooh and all about, but that don't put food on your table.
Right.
That doesn't lead you down a path where you're going to have pride. Look at what we helped build. That's what happened when we were growing up. We were proud of what we had done as far as creating a painting, whatever it was. That's what we were proud of, and now most of that's been taken away.
Right, of course.
You know, you talk about skills in school. I have a cutting board that I put together back in junior high school. I watched that cutting board today. I gave it to somebody, but every now and then I go see it, and I have pride in the fact that I built something back in the 70s that's around over 30 years later, and people use. So this is why I go back and I have a lot of focus and a lot of passion for the economic development, and it's a process that we didn't fail at. We're being cut off at. So when you have mayors, when you have people like the current superintendent that don't believe in trades in schools and don't even believe in our participation economically. They just want our vote so that they get the money. This is why I don't support either of the 3 bond elections, because we are just riding by watching somebody else make all the money.
That's exactly right. Right quick. You know, and I'm glad you said that, because it's almost like we are afraid to approach the power that be about putting these programs, because we've got young people that are not going to school. We got a lot of time on their hand, but yet they end up in jail. And in the Harris County Jail, they got programs set aside that the schools should be implementing, but they're doing it in the jailhouse. Now that's a bad picture to me, because why can't we stand up for our kids and say, all these kids running around, walking around, might not make A, B's, and C's, but like you're talking about that board you made, that's a motivational tool. Give a kid some self-worth, make them proud. You know. But we are almost afraid to approach these people and stand up for what we believe is the right thing. Put some of this money, $1.9 billion you're asking for, you got money there left over. Put some of that money into these schools for programs such as that. Now, the superintendent made a remark, I didn't like it, that he's not going to put money in the schools for somebody to go out and do a $5 weave job in the community. That's wrong. And if we allow people to make those statements like that, to me, it's got racist undertone. I don't like that. I didn't like it. So if we stand by and let these people just run roughshod over us continually, our kids are going to perish. They end up in jail. They end up in a situation where Ms. House talked about that they come out, no jobs. You get a kid out of school, you rush them through high school, they graduate, you're proud of the fact they graduated, but when they graduate, you push them out the door to what? No jobs.
And therefore, you breed a bad environment. You breed an environment, set up an environment where crime is going to flow.
Of course.
And a lot of other ills are going to happen because there's no economic activity. If you looked at the city of Houston, in many cities where you will find black populations, if you looked at it from high, it's almost lights out in the black community. There's no business activity. There is very little for our youth to get involved in and get engaged in the evening. And this is something that has been put in motion and is playing itself out. It's somewhat of a strategy to help make money off of, and it's not, in the aggregate money, it's not much different between that and slavery. It really is. When it's about human rights. So what they're doing is they're denying us human rights to access the capital system. And so I've had hands-on experience as a business person in dealing with a number of these issues in these environments. So when I'm talking here, I'm not talking from a speculative position or a he said, she said position. I am talking about actual on-the-ground experience and having conversations with the mayor, going to HISD and working with people who've tried to get contracts and had some of their contracts terminated for no reason, had a huge negative impact on their credit. Therefore, they lose their bonding capabilities. So when people like Saavedra and all these folks say, well, y'all can't get a bond, you can't get bonding, well, the reason why is because the system that you have in place denies us that opportunity. It continues to deny us that opportunity.
That is exactly right. You are exactly right.
This has been, we're getting close to winding down now, and as I sit here, I see so many different areas that we need to, there's so much work to be done. So we can't sit idly back and do nothing. And we can have all these shows that we want, but if we're not willing to step out there, like Pastor said, and talk to the powers to be, and let our voices be heard, then nothing's going to get done. It's going to stay that way. I personally feel that there's a solution, but it's going to take people that want to do it.
Yes.
You can't sit back and talk about it. You got to move forward and do something about it.
And you can't just sit back and pray about it. You must go to work.
Actually, when you
Prayer
pray,
helps.
you need to be doing something.
You need to
pray and you're doing something while you're
it should be
praying.
energizing you.
Yes.
I get motivation from prayer to say, God, lead me to what I would do next to help solve this problem.
Yeah.
But just sitting back and saying, well, I prayed on it, I'm done, now let's go get a hamburger,
No.
it's
When
not
you
going to
pray,
fix anything.
you need to be working.
Yes.
Prayer calls for work.
It won't fall in your
It
lap.
does.
He says he'll open up the windows, but you got to be doing something when you when he opens up those windows. So I want to thank Ms. House and I want to thank Mr. Cole for being here with us today. Also, my Pastor Nash for being here with us today. This has been a good show. It's good information, and it's something for everybody out there to think about. And I'm hoping that those that listen to the show will think about it and know that somebody's out there looking at what's happening and want to help. Too late.